Salman Rushdie is here. He first rose to literary prominence 20 years ago after winning the Booker Prize for his novel Midnight's Children. In 1989, he attracted international attention when the Ayatollah Khomeini accused him of anti-Islamic blasphemy and issued a fatwa against him for his novel The Satanic Verses. His latest book, Step Across This Line, is a collection of his essays, speeches, and opinion pieces for the last 10 years. This nonfiction work explores subjects ranging from his fascination with the Wizard of Oz and soccer to his thoughts on the state of the novel, Kosovo, and globalization. I am very pleased to have him back for another appearance at this table. Thank you.
It's great to be here again.
Oh, it's great to have you. Dedication is to Christopher Hitchens.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Christopher and I go back a long way, and
This is London stuff, or? London stuff.
Yeah, London stuff, and but not just that. It's also that he's was a great ally, you know, in my time of trouble,
right.
and you know, you remember the people who were there when it counted, you know, and I wanted to recognise what a great pal he was then, and what a wonderful polemicist he is.
He is a wonderful polemicist. I mean, he whatever you think about the strength of his arguments. The passion for the delivery is wonderful.
Yes, he's a master of language, and he's funny. You know, you forgive people a lot of things, including being wrong, if they're funny.
He must have been a great debater.
Yeah, I'm sure he was. I mean, I didn't know him at Oxford, but I think he and Martin Amis decided to divide the world.
Yes, I think
you know,
so.
Christopher got non-fiction and Martin got fiction.
And Christopher reviewed Martin over the weekend.
Yeah. Well, maybe
it's in a magazine piece I wrote.
Yeah, it was in Atlantic. Yeah, they obviously disagree about the Stalin book.
Right, about Martin's book. Yeah, they obviously do. Yes. I never asked you about this in all the conversations we've had. Did you lose friends then? The time that
then?
Yeah.
No, you know, actually, it was the opposite. I gained friends. I mean, it was one of the most remarkable aspects of what happened to me, that people wanted to get closer, you know, and help and show support and so on. Yeah, just sort of do all sorts, some in private ways and some in public ways. But you know, I mean, actually, I got a lot. I got a lot of extra friends. I don't think I lost a single one.
Oh, that's great. And all of that is behind you.
Sure, thank goodness. And I'm hoping, you know, one of the things about this book is that I wanted to try and, in a way, represent for people what those years had been like, you know, and it was the hardest thing because I wrote all this stuff in that period, a lot of which was, frankly, yesterday's papers, a lot of which was sort of polemical, day-by-day argument, and I thought, well, I can't just put that in because it's boring, you know.
Yeah.
So, in a way, the bit of the book that's most reworked, that's most kind of creatively made, you know, is the long section which deals with what I call messages from the plague years, and I hope by the end of it, it's whatever it is, 60 or 70 pages now, if people read that, they should get a sense of what it was like, not just politically, not just in terms of, you know, the great ideas that we were fighting for and so on, but also kind of personally what it was like to be me going through that. And I think it's the closest I'll ever get to autobiography for a really long time. But I hope also...
You mean this part?
That part, you know, part 2 of the book, which deals...
Because you'll ever get to autobiography.
Yeah, because who needs an autobiography, you know, and I've got books to write, which I'm much more engaged by than just telling my story.
Do you have a specific... I mean, do you have like 3 books in your head?
Yeah. Yeah, at the moment...
You got to flesh them out, but you got them there.
Yeah, at the moment, I must say, it's a great thing for me. I feel really, you know, full of books when I'm writing a novel, and I think I certainly know the one after it, and I think I probably know the one after that at the moment.
Wow.
So,
but do you think about them?
Yeah, all the time.
Would you go home if you had a thought that might apply to the one that's second or third?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm doing all that. I've got all these files building up for, you know, books to write.
Oh, that's great.
You know, and I mean, it never happened to me before. You know, I mean, normally, if I know the book I'm working on, that, you know, that's more than enough. But this time, suddenly, I've got this kind of project, you know, and it feels great. It feels like having a job. Yeah,
it must be great for a novelist because I constantly, you know, having a reasonably active life, constantly see scenes because of what I do. It's like, it would be a great scene for a movie. You see two people interacting, or you just see something that's extraordinarily interesting, different, beautiful, ugly, horrendous.
No, well, it's sort of what happened with Fury was that was supposed to be a future book. You know, I was actually working on the book that I'm working on now. And then this other book, which I'd been making notes for, thinking that's an interesting thing, I might come to that, suddenly started insisting. And it jumped the queue, you know. It forced its way to the front of the line, you know. So that's what happens if you are, you know, lucky enough to have 2 or 3 things on the boil. Sometimes they don't happen in the order they're supposed to.
I know, I can do a great imagination of where these are things we call ideas. They say, I'm next. Oh, no. I'm next. Because my time has come.
Exactly.
Circumstances dictate. I'm sorry. Circumstances
didn't get you.
Deserve that IB.
No, it's like, you know, when I remember I was a friend of the great Italian writer Italo Calvino, and when he died, his widow told me he had 7 works in progress. You know, because he was unlike me. He could actually write 7 books at the same time. You know, he'd decide today.
I couldn't see how anybody could do that.
How would you do that? You know, the scale of mental and imaginative discipline required to do that is unimaginable. But he would literally have 7 books on the go, and he'd go to that desk, say, "Well, now I'll do this one," and do a page of that, and then he'd do a page of that one. And,
I don't know how to do that. So, are there common themes in this thing when you look at a body of work?
Well, that's in a way the thing that I hoped would happen, because I think it happened with my first book of essays, Imaginary Homelands, and I really wanted it not just to be a kind of rag bag, you know, of bits. And I think the common themes are, well, first of all, the thing that I always bang on about, which is migration and its place in the world, you know, how we all, these days, more and more of us start in one place and end in another, and that journey becomes a kind of defining aspect of ourselves, you know. And, you know, The Wizard of Oz is about that too. You know, The Wizard of Oz is about, you know, coming from Kansas and ending up in Oz, you know, coming from black and white and ending up in Technicolor, you know, and along the way kind of growing up. You know, Dorothy grows up, the Wicked Witch grows down.
That's one theme that...
that's one thing. Migration, because I think this is really the age of the migrant. You know, this is the first time really in the history of the world, thanks to, you know, airplanes and so on, that people have been able to travel in such great numbers across the world. And so, you know, they have. And there have been more people moved across the planet, you know, in the last 50 or 100 years than ever in the history of the human race before. So it's made a great shift. I mean, look at New York City. I mean, it's one of the things that attracts me to New York City, you know, is that it's the city in which everybody has a journey behind them. Came from somewhere.
And many people came from some neighborhood around here, but it is amazing to me. I mean, it is the thing that makes New York and America so powerful in the imagination of people. It is that it is a place to go that welcomes you
and make yourself up.
The truth is
to go and make yourself up, reinvent yourself, be whoever, you know, be anything you can.
It is the end of a migration, or a stop on a migration.
So, you know, my life and my books have been kind of migrating from India via England, and now they've ended up here. So that's a theme in it, you know. Clearly, the other theme in it is the one which, in a way, got given to me, you know, by my life, which is you know, the conflict between freedom and unfreedom, the conflict between broad-mindedness and narrow-mindedness, between open societies and closed societies, between fanaticism and tolerance, etc. You know, I mean, I've had to kind of live that, you know, and so naturally that has leaked into quite a lot of what I've written.
It's just true about most writers, because some critics have said Rushdie is always rewriting the same themes.
Yeah, well, William Faulkner wrote about a piece of the earth the size of this table. Yeah, I mean, so what I'm saying is that there are things that a writer can't escape because they are a part of his makeup. You know, there are other things he can't escape because they're a deep part of what happened to him.
Yeah, and because he can never, because he finds them endlessly. The deeper he gets, the more enthralled he becomes.
And your relationship with your subject changes, because you get older, things happen to you, you rethink things, the world makes you rethink things, you know. And so, with any luck, the books are not repetitive, they just come at things from, you know, endlessly different perspectives. But, you know, if you look at, I'm criticized for both things. I'm criticized for writing the same book all the time, and I'm criticized for never writing the same book all the time. You know, so I write a novel about rock and roll, they say, what's he writing about rock and roll for? You know?
Exactly.
So you get it both ways. I mean, the point is, there are people who respond to your work, and there are people who don't. And if you're lucky, as I have been lucky, the people who do respond to your work are, plentiful enough to make a living.
Have you ever had writer's block?
Not as such, no. I've had the closest I ever came to it was actually, for obvious reasons, after the Khomeini fatwa.
Right.
It was what happened was, for the first time, my conviction that what I wanted to do in my life was to be a writer was shaken. And it was a dreadful feeling. I felt that here, the Satanic Verses I think of as one of my best books. It certainly was one of the most demanding on me, in terms of the creative effort it required. It took me almost 5 years to write. And, you write with your best self, really. You try and put absolutely the best of your mind and heart and spirit into what you do. And I felt, I did all that, and then this happened. That's what you get for making such an effort. And I thought, well, maybe it would be good to be not a writer. Maybe it would be good to be, a bus conductor. And I felt very disillusioned with my field of work, And
how long did this last?
Well, actually, I was saved really by my son, who had made me promise to write a book for him. And I thought, well, that's a promise I have to keep, after all, this whole thing had happened to him too, and he was only 9 at the time. And so writing Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which was my promise to him, really made me rediscover my pleasure in my work and why I did it.
What does India mean to you today?
Well, the loss of India, because for some years during the fatwa, I couldn't go back.
Right.
They wouldn't give me a visa and so on. And then finally, 2 or 3 years ago, that changed. And it just felt like healing, in a way, the deepest wound, of those years. Because it's where I come from. It's my parents are Indian. I'm Indian. I was born Indian. My DNA is Indian. My imagination was shaped by it more than anywhere else. I've never yet managed to write a novel that didn't have an Indian leading character. And I don't expect to do so anytime soon. So it's, of all these different perspectives that my life has given me, whether it's India or Pakistan or England or the United States or whatever, India is the primary perspective. That's where I really see things from, because the place you're.
So, at a first definition,
Indian writer.
Indian writer, but Indian is.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's one of those things which, as you go through life, sometimes you feel more, Indian. Sometimes you feel more your migrated self. You feel more like a Londoner or a New Yorker or whatever it is. But the thing that keeps coming back is where you were born and raised. And I think I think the place you were a child, the place you grew up.
I mean, I saw 60 Minutes on Sunday, and there were these Afghans who had fled Afghanistan because of the Taliban. They were coming back. Why do you come back?
No, because it's home.
It's home.
It's home. Yeah.
And the Taliban had destroyed everything.
Yeah. Well, you're going to go
they
back.
They came back because it was home.
Yeah, they're going to go back to rebuild it. No doubt they feel, or they hope. Home. Home is a weird idea nowadays because, because of the migration phenomenon, many of us lose that sense of a real, defined, rooted home. Home is where you hang your hat. Home is the life you make for yourself. But there is that other pull. I mean, I've written a lot in my life about the pull of away. The pull of migration, the pull to go somewhere and make something of your life. But there's also the opposite pull, which is the pull of home.
Yeah.
And both those things pull on us, and they tug us back and forth.
Tell me about the war on terrorism and how you see it, because you have said, written, that it will only end when terrorists believe that terrorism is more damaging than American values to them.
Well, when Muslim societies start thinking that, if you look, there's an easy parallel, which is what's been happening or beginning to happen in Northern Ireland. One of the things that drove the IRA to the peace table was that their own constituency got sick of what they were doing. That's to say that the Northern Irish Catholic community got sick of living in a world that kept blowing up. And now that you've had, even though it's by no means over, that problem, you've had a few years of not having terrorist attacks, and therefore you begin to see what's called the peace dividend, where suddenly there's money coming into the province, there's jobs coming into the province. The more of the peace dividend you get, the less possible it is for anybody to go back to the gun and the bomb, because people will not stand for it. And it seemed to me that, yes, there is a role for the United States to have played in the last year, which was necessary. I supported the actions in Afghanistan very strongly. I believe that the defeat of the Taliban is a real gain for the human race, and
God, who doesn't?
Well, certainly the Afghan people seem to think so. And
the only people that don't are the hardcore Talibans.
Exactly.
Hardcore.
I have a lot more reservations about what's being projected in Iraq now, whether it happens or not. But I think in the end, the way in which the terrorists will cease to exist is when their own constituency turns against them. When people in the Muslim world say, we don't want to be defined by this, we don't want this to be, this thing is damaging us economically, politically, socially, culturally, we have to get rid of it. Therefore, the solution is not, finally, in the hands of the West. The solution is finally in the hands of the societies from which these people have emerged.
Same thing is true about the Israeli-Palestinian crisis.
Yeah. In the end, people have to solve their own problems.
And some people have to come to the conclusion this is more damaging.
Yeah, they've got to work out that they are not being well served by the way this is going.
Step across this line. Why is that the title?
Well, frontiers. I've spent a lot of my life writing about crossing lines. Literal frontiers. Lines of taboo. Can't say this. Can't go there.
Right.
Mustn't talk like that.
Step across that line.
Step across that line. If in doubt, step across it.
I believe that if it's you're more often, and I've said often, you are more often well served by saying yes rather than no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've just found it in my life. Every time anybody says don't, I find myself irresistibly drawn to doing it.
Me too, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Salman Rushdie, Step Across This Line, collected nonfiction, 1992, 2002. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.